Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Kerman with Leading Edge Seminars, and I'm really happy to welcome you, members of our community, some of who just finished a webinar with Margaret Wernberg. Thanks for coming back for another hour. And for everyone else, I'm really happy you're here. Today, we're going to be having a virtual lunch together with Linda Green, and I'll be introducing Linda shortly. What the format is we've been having and what we're going to do today is that I'm going to just do a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing, some kind of housekeeping, talk about our plans. Then I'll share some reflections of my own and some inspirations of my own. And then I will introduce Linda, who will be with us for the remainder of the hour. We'll have a conversation like we're having lunch during a workshop break in Toronto, except she is in California and I'm in Toronto. And then we'll open it for question and answers. The question and answer way you can ask a question, if you look on your little screen, it says questions, and you can write in questions for Linda. And that would be appreciated. We have almost 1,000 people who'll be watching, so you may not get all your questions answered, but we'll do certainly the best we can. Reminder that everything we do these days, these lunches and our mini webinars are archived and on our website, leadingedgeseminars.org. So if you miss some of this, if you have to attend to something else, if you have a technical problem, they'll be available on our website. These sessions, the lunch is almost immediately, our webinars a little bit later. So let me tell you about our virtual lunches, because we're changing almost hourly and daily. So this week, tomorrow, we're going to have Leanna Lowenstein at this time. She's developed a lot of very useful ways of working with children. And now she's going to be talking at lunchtime about how she's kind of making the move to online help. She'll also do a mini webinar on Saturday. On Friday, we'll have Lisa Ferentz, who's been a great teacher about trauma and post-traumatic growth and strength. She'll be joining me for lunch. We've just asked and we've received the okay from Lynn Grodsky, who's really the Dean of Professional Development, Practice Development for people who are in the helping fields and are either building or beginning private practice. And she's going to talk about what that means in this environment. We're also going to have coming up in the next few weeks, John Briere, another trauma expert who's really influenced the treatment of trauma for many years. And Roy Kiesling, who has been teaching EMDR for a long, long time, and he'll be joining us for lunch. In terms of our mini webinars, so that was our virtual lunches. They're free, they're archived, you're welcome anytime to join us. Our mini webinars, the idea, they're 2 hours, they're low cost, they give you lots of very useful information right away with terrific people like Linda Graham, who'll be here next week, Janina Fisher, and I'm happy to announce, no one else knows this but my staff, but Stephen Porges and Deb Dana will be together in conversation as a mini webinar on using the polyvagal theory, and that's coming up. So I'm really excited about that. So here's a reflection. I didn't start off talking about how frightening these days are in many, many ways, and the frightening news that's coming out, and how that's affecting your clients, many of us. And even today, when I opened up my New York Times, is that what you say when you're online? When I opened it up online, there was an article about it's time to make your own face mask with very detailed instructions of how to make a face mask. Now, the thing about frightening news is that therapists hear frightening news almost every day. And how many friends or family have said to you, how can you do that in your life? Sit down with people for hours and hear about what their misery, their difficulties. And you know that you're moved, you're saddened, you're able to be compassionate with these people, with these clients. And then you look for the strengths, the opportunities, the resources they have, the resources they had to even make an appointment or to get in their car or take a bus to meet you. You know that they have strengths, and you look for glimmers of hope. These are people quite often who have the incredible strength of trauma survivors. And you listen and you learn and you kind of get more and more ideas of how they made it through it, their coping mechanisms, the strengths and weaknesses of their adaptive patterns, and their adaptive patterns drive them and drive us every day. Some of them work very, very well for us, and for people with more problems, the adaptive patterns create problems in their life today. The patterns that they used when they were 2 or 3 or 5, it helped them get through their crisis. Now, it doesn't help them in the same way in a different situation as adults. Now I'd like to tell you my inspiration. Ram Dass has been an inspiration to me for a long, long time. He was born Richard Alpert. He was a best-selling author, spiritual leader, and a former psychologist. Ram Dass died in December at the age of 88. His 1971 book, Be Here and Now, influenced many people, including, and had a great effect on the therapy world, because younger people who read his book, who were psychologists and seekers and hopers, became influencers and were using many of his ideas about mindfulness in their lives and their practice. So before I introduce Lisa, 3 quotes from Ram Dass. Suffering is the sandpaper of our incarnation. It does its work of shaping us. Second one, and maybe this is especially important these days. It is important to expect nothing, to take every experience, including the negative ones, as merely steps on the path, and to proceed. And the third one, again, especially relevant. Everything in your life is there as a vehicle for your transformation. Use it. Linda, I'd like to welcome you onto the screen and say a few things about you. Hi, Linda. So
Hi,
for you out
Michael.
there looking at Linda, you should know that for 25 years, she's been a licensed individual and family therapist. And in 2013, she came out to the world writing a book called Bouncing Back, Wiring Your Brain for Maximum Resilience and Well-Being. And in talking about that book or writing about it, she said, now listen to this. Now maybe she had some inside information in 2013. Resilience is our innate capacity to handle life's challenges, whether everyday disappointment or extraordinary disasters. Her second book, Resilience, offered practices for bouncing back, and these were 130 evidence-based tools to strengthen the foundations of resilience. And these include tools about somatic intelligence, emotional intelligence, relational intelligence with oneself and with others, and reflective intelligence. These books and her reputation has spread, and now she's asked to go around the world to speak and train therapists. She's certainly been in Toronto with us several times in a room of adoring audience members. She also does something else, which is very, very special. Almost daily, she sends out her email on her email list, and they're chock full of resources. It's free. The email list is free. And if you like what Linda's saying today, you're welcome to join her email list. I look forward to receiving it every day, and sometimes it's always too much. Oh, God, there's so many resources. Where do I start? And Linda is one of those rare people who combine intelligence, warmth, and empathy, along with all those tools to help therapists and everyone live better and practice better. Linda, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for Leading Edge Seminars being the leading edge right now of offering all these resources and tools to clinicians virtually, online, free. It's a tremendous gift. So thank you for the generosity and the integrity of that.
Thank you, Linda. So I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience. Some people know you very well. You might be new to some people. So how did you get started in this work and this life? Just bring us up to date with who you are and how you became who you are. The big question.
So I'd actually like to reflect on your reflection and your inspiration, because that's very relevant to me, being a psychotherapist. I've had many people ask me, how can you sit and listen to people's problems all day? Doesn't it get exhausting? And my answer always is, but I'm not listening to only to the problems. I'm listening to their courage to find solutions to the problems. I'm listening to their process, their strengths, their healing. And that's what makes therapy a sacred journey. That's what's energizing and rewarding for us as the therapist, is to be part of people's journeys, no matter how difficult or what problems they're presenting. So I find it actually very energizing to be working with clients, even in this time when we're all sheltering in place. And I have a couple of clients, because they have family at home, in order to have privacy, they're doing their sessions with me by Zoom on their phone, parked in their car, because that's how they have quiet and privacy to do the therapy at the moment. I also wanted to reflect on what you offered from Ram Dass and other inspiring sayings, because almost at the same time that I became a psychotherapist, I started studying meditation at Spirit Rock Meditation Center. So combining how we strengthen the sense of self in our psychotherapy work, and how with meditation practice we learn to let go of that sense of self and drop into a sense of something larger and vaster, was a big impetus for me for writing the book, Bouncing Back, of how to integrate those two very, very different paradigms and offer tools to clients to do that. So my own training in resilience really was anchored first with Dan Siegel at UCLA and interpersonal neurobiology, and focusing on attachment, because attachment conditioning, attachment trauma has so much to do with how resilient we are from the inside out. So attachment theory, relational theory, mindfulness theory, brain science, all of the confluence of all of that was a big anchor for me. And likewise, Diana Fosha with AEDP and working with attachment and emotions, and then bringing that into the relationship. So many, many other wonderful clinicians and mentors and teachers that I've had. Something that was very important to me was Rick Hansen, who founded a small group for us here in California called Neurodharma, and bringing together people who are interested in neuroscience and contemplative practice and psychology. And so it's always the confluence of these many different disciplines that has been part of my work. And I wrote the book Bouncing Back because I wanted to have something to hand my clients and say, here's what you can do to find your own resilience, to find your own strength, to find your own authentic self again. So since then, really, there's been so much learning, teaching other clinicians, like coming to Toronto and working with people at Leading Edge, because I get ideas all the time from clinicians when they're talking about their clients. And when I teach a workshop, I really try to make space for, and what do you do? What do you use? What have you found that works? Because clinicians out there know a lot about what works already. And so I try to just incorporate that into what I offer as well. So that's me.
You've offered a lot of...
Michael, I want to interrupt.
Sure.
Because there was one other thing I made a note when
Sure.
you were talking and offering those quotes. One of the quotes that I often use in my trainings is from James Russell Lowell, who said, mishaps are like knives that either cut us or serve us as we grasp them by the blade or by the handle. And I think that's so relevant to right now, and all the uncertainty and the fears and the concerns that we're facing, and how we perceive this situation, how we perceive our coping, how we learn from other people's coping, I think really makes a difference in how we're able to face the coronavirus pandemic or anything that people are worried about. Our perception of the stressor and our own response is really key.
What are you hearing from clients and colleagues today, just in the last few weeks? What has it been like for you? What do you hear?
Here's something I'm learning. Okay, so one of the things I learn from my clients all the time is how they're finding ways to stay connected. You know, the San Francisco Bay Area was one of the first places in the country to go into shelter in place. So we've had 3 weeks already. And so I'm hearing from my clients how they are staying connected with other people. And we all probably saw the YouTube that went viral of the Italians singing to each other from their balconies. So one of my clients is here in the West Coast, her family's on the East Coast, and they have set up a Farkle tournament, which is simply an online game that kids can play. And they've set up a tournament so that the cousins get to play with each other via the internet. Another client of mine said she lives in San Francisco, crowded neighborhood, up on a hill. The neighbors come out every night at sunset and they sit on their porches and they watch the sunset together. So when I hear from my clients what they're doing to stay connected in this time of sheltering in place, I think it's important to collect these stories and share them with each other. Because when I hear how other people are connecting, it helps me feel connected to common humanity. It helps me feel like, oh yeah, we are all in this together. And that's a support for our resilience right there. So that's one of the things. Another thing I'm seeing with my clients is people are kind of finding out what they're made of. And they're finding out that they have more strength and courage than they thought. And so I'm watching one of my clients who's a parent. Kids are home now. She's helping with the homeschooling and the online learning. Husband is home working in tech. And she is finding out, hey, she really has a lot of ideas for crafts and games and keeping the kids occupied. She's really showing up to keep them reassured, to keep them connected with their friends. And so she's finding strengths that perhaps weren't so visible to her before. So that's one thing that I see happening with clients in all of this.
One thing I heard recently, which I'm certainly you talk about, is resilience really is our heritage and legacy. Our ancestors were running away from those lions and tigers, and they weren't thinking about anything except survival, and they survived. And that's part of who we are. And when we're running away from the lion or the tiger, we're not thinking, oh, isn't it good? I'm a human being and I have this wonderful legacy and I'll probably get through this. You're wondering if you can be alive in 10 seconds. So just like comment about that.
So what I often teach is that resilience is our birthright. It's a capacity that's innate in our being because it's innate in our brain. So the capacities to develop resilience are there in the human brain. And we develop those capacities over time from people around us who are role models for resilience, but also learning from our own experience. And in fact, we're finding you learn resilience only from experience. You learn resilience by having to deal with things that are difficult or challenging. And you not only learn how to handle things that are hard, you learn that you can. You learn that you can be resilient. So I do teach that resilience is learnable and trainable. And as you were talking earlier about clients who have had previous trauma or a lack of experience in developing resilience, so they have patterns now that we all have automatic survival patterns. That's part of who we are as human beings. And we've learned patterns for coping and surviving. Some of them are adaptive and we carry them forward. Some of them worked at the time, blessings that they worked at the time, but not so adaptive or flexible now. So we want to be able to learn new patterns. And the thing about the neuroplasticity in the brain, we can rewire the brain. We can learn new patterns so that our resilience becomes more adaptive, more flexible, more skillful, more effective. So I really encourage clients to think about themselves as someone who can be resilient, who can learn how to be resilient, and to know that they can. That capacity is there all the time.
Is this something you talk about with clients in terms of giving them that kind of background of their birthright, or are there resources you suggest to them?
So I'm doing therapy with clients, and that's the engaging, attuning, the listening, the reflecting, the helping them explore. But sometimes there's some psycho-ed about how the brain works. And clients I have found actually love learning how the brain works because they get to feel competent and then they get to feel confident, trusting their own capacities. So we will talk about the power of neuroplasticity, and I will teach the clients, since we have the capacity to change our habits, to change our patterns, to some extent, we have a responsibility to learn how to do that. We have a responsibility to learn how to be more resilient, how to be more who we truly are, how to relate to people in a more effective way. And so I will teach tools in the session. I will often do the tools with the session, with the client in the session. But then I ask them to repeat those tools 5 times a day for the rest of the week. That's not a magic number, but by repeating the practice, their brain develops the neural circuitry, and then they actually get to experience, oh, this works. And it actually begins to become the automatic pattern that the brain will go to, so that when they're running away from the lion, they don't have to think about putting their hand on their heart to calm themselves down. It becomes an automatic pattern to do that.
You mentioned psychoed, and it's generally not a big part of people's practices, and for a variety of reasons. But a lot of clients in private practice, especially, are very high-powered people, and they don't have time and whatever. People have a lot more time for psychoed now. Your books will be a resource for people who, might have put them on their bookshelf and said, I'll get to that. What are other resources that you might suggest online, or books, or anything that therapists might suggest for their clients in their spare time these days?
Okay, so here's how I'll answer that. My post this morning, Resources for Recovering Resilience, was titled From Our Screens to Your Screens, and it was a list of online resources that clients can go to be very, very helpful to them. So that just happened this morning. Here's what I'm thinking these days about psychoed, because normally I'm careful about that. I do therapy. We do a lot of deep diving kind of work. But right now, it's so important that clients feel stable, that they feel safe, that they feel regulated. And so I'm doing more of that psychoed right now to make sure clients are stable within themselves so that they are safe to do the therapy work. And so I'm pushing a little bit more the importance of exercise, because we need to keep our bodies healthy. Right now, exercise keeps the brain healthy. We need to make sure we're getting enough sleep, not only for physical health, but sleep absorbs the stress hormone cortisol. So the better sleep we get, the less anxious we're going to be. Spending time in nature, because we get to experience we're part of something much larger than ourselves, much vaster than ourselves. Being able to meditate, and right now there are as many resources online for mindfulness meditation as there are leading edge seminars coming out helping clinicians. So being able to come to a sense of presence and a feeling of safety and calm within the body, within the mind. So I'm doing more of those stabilizing tools right now, just to make sure that the clients then feel contained enough within themselves that they can do that work going back to childhood trauma and how those implicit memories still operate today. So for right now, I'm doing a little bit more of that.
Mm-hmm. So maybe now, since you mentioned your email, let's mention how people can get on your list to get your daily messages. We might as well say it now.
Okay. So I have a website, lindagraham-mft.net, and that website archives all these posts. It archives all the interviews I've recorded with other experts on resilience. It has audio recordings of all the exercises from my books. So there's a lot of resources on my website, and they're all free. They're all free, and they're all easily downloadable. So through the website, people can also send in the form to be on the newsletter list as well.
Now, this might be on your website today, but I'm wondering, there's so much generosity of yoga studios and mindfulness teachers, and there are lots of people are saying here. Are there any particular ones that you're finding most helpful with clients, or that you're using yourself among the plethora of new possibilities?
Okay, so I would give a plug for the Greater Good Science Center, which is at UC Berkeley here in California, and they post things all the time, research-based, about positive emotions and generosity and altruism and mindfulness and forgiveness and all these kind of resources that actually support resilience, but really are the foundations of our well-being. They support our well-being. And so easy to access articles and videos and all of their resources as well. Greater Good Science Center.
Okay, absolutely good. Just to shift for a second, we had a question about children and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not thinking of child therapy per se, because that's a whole area, but how do you help parents deal with their children and resilience these days?
Okay, so I have two ways to answer that. One, I'll give another plug to my friend Christine Carter, who is part of Greater Good Science Center. And she just published her book called The New Adolescence: Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction. And it is quite fabulous. So that's a wonderful resource, The New Adolescence. For working with younger children, parents are the role models for resilience, but they are also regulating their children's resilience. So it's the nervous system of the parent that regulates the nervous system of the child. It is the emotional equilibrium of the parent that brings the child to emotional equilibrium. It's the parent seeing the child as capable and resilient and strong that helps the child see themselves as capable and resilient and strong. So again, that's our attachment theory. But for the younger children, it's just being resilient and being connected is how to help the children be resilient. The other thing that I keep hearing from all of my clients is to help the kids stay connected with their friends. And that's virtual most of the time these days. Except I did see a video of kids 6 feet away dancing out in the street, to have the connection, because that's what the kids are missing the most these days, is the connections with their friends. So to be the resilient role model, to be resilient and help kids see how they are, and then help them stay connected with their friends.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine, and this is what I'm hearing from people, that online therapy and counseling sessions are focusing more on the practicalities of everyday life, like maintaining structure and eating and exercise. Are you finding that? And what are some of the issues that are coming up right now with people that you help them practically?
What I'm seeing being offered online everywhere also from hospitals and medical people, as well as psychologists, is how important structure and routine is, because that keeps us anchored. And when we have a structure, we feel agentic. We feel a little bit more in control of our day or control of what's happening. And when we have those routines, when we put things in order, that actually helps us put ourselves in order psychologically. So it's a tool for all time. I mean, to be structured and have routines has been a standby forever to be resilient. And so it's especially important to be able to do that now. And I noticed the other morning I was having my breakfast and taking my vitamins, and I thought, well, I probably don't have to take my vitamins, but you know what? It's part of who I am. It's part of how I take care of myself. It's part of how I stay healthy. And I realized that was an important part of my routine. It was important to continue that because it gives me the message that I'm doing what I can to be resilient.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll go to some questions from viewers. One is about how do you help adult children with Asperger's learn resilience, people on the spectrum? Any thoughts about that?
Well, my experience with my clients, or children of my clients, who are on the spectrum, is because the strengths of someone who has Asperger's is in their cognitive functioning. There are deficits emotionally or socially or relationally, but their strengths are in their cognitive functioning. So to be able to use those strengths to have people understand what's going on. And it may take some more time to sit down and talk things through, But I have found when you go for those strengths, the children can respond or the people can respond. So that's what I would suggest.
Mhm. Okay, a question, an interesting question. Can you speak the concept of small acts of kindness that have a big impact, something called ordinary magic? Do you hear people talking about those kinds of things these days?
So I'm going to answer that in two ways. Kindness, gratitude, compassion, joy, delight, serenity, any of the positive emotions. We know that the steady practice of those practices shifts the functioning of the brain. And it shifts it to more bigger picture, more receptivity and openness to learning, more optimism. The direct, measurable cause and effect outcome of practicing kindness and gratitude and compassion and joy is resilience. So I love teaching people that. We practice kindness and gratitude, etc., not just to feel better, but to do better. So it's a powerful tool. The other part of the answer to that is that the brain learns best, little and often. That's just simply true, how the brain learns. Small experiences repeated many times. So if you have small acts of kindness and repeat them many, many times, your brain is learning the value of being kind. It's learning how to go there more quickly. So that's exactly the way we can be resilient. And when Mother Teresa says, it's wonderful to want to do grand and noble things, but really we do small things with great kindness and love. And so these small acts make a huge difference, and the science can tell us why.
I've been hearing from some therapists about, do I change how often I see people, how long I see them, should I check back? It's not like come back next week for some people now. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's always, what does the client need? And listening to what the client needs. And some of my clients have said, I'm going to handle this on my own. I'll check back with you in a couple months. Other clients have ramped up their schedule and seeing me more than once a week. I'm just listening to my clients about what seems useful to them. The one place where I initiate suggesting more regular contact is when I sense that there's tension or conflict in the home. And we're sheltering in place now. So people are more likely to be picking up the tension from their spouses or their partners and communicating that to their children. And that's when I'm more likely to suggest more regular sessions so that I can help regulate that and they can be more safe with each other at home.
Mm-hmm. And with your clients right now, I'm sure there's a range in terms of reaction to what's going on in the news every day. I would imagine some people are handling it better, some are worse. What are you finding?
Well, as is true at any time, when there's been previous trauma, then the capacities to cope with anything current are somewhat compromised and somewhat diminished. So if people have had enough trauma in their lives to teach them how to be resilient, but not so much that it derails the development of the capacities of the brain and the psyche to be resilient, then they're probably going to use what they've learned to cope now. But when people have had previous trauma, and if that, or too much previous trauma in childhood, and if that hasn't been resolved, then the capacities to cope now are going to be compromised. So trying to create enough stability that they can cope now and hold on for the time when we can do more of that deep trauma work and heal some of the memories that would come up and derail them now. So it really is being very sensitive to the client's not only explicit expression of what's going on for them, but the implicit expression of what's going on for them, which clients aren't always aware of, and trying to catch that and say what just happened, what just shifted. I had a client yesterday who is tremendously successful in her life and doing very, very well, coping with everything, until she bursts into tears, and I go, what's going on? Let's slow down a little bit. Can you tell me? And something that happened right now triggers a childhood memory very, very early on. And so we know to slow down, make room for that, create the conditions where it will be safe and productive to work with that. So I think I'm always, when I'm doing therapy, I'm always listening for how clients are solving their problems. And I'm always listening for what derails them from being able to solve their own problems. And so I'm listening on at least 8 tracks at once and paying attention to when something shifts and needs to be addressed right there in the therapy session.
Speaking of therapy sessions today, a few weeks ago, you would ask some therapists, do they do online therapy? They would say, "Oh, I have a very busy private practice. People are coming to my office. Life's good. And I don't like the idea. It doesn't seem to make sense. People are so far away." Have you been doing online counseling before, and how much? And what would you recommend to people who've never done this before?
Well, I have been doing online therapy for a number of years, sometimes because I have clients that I've seen in my office and then they move away, and so we're able to continue doing therapy from a distance. Sometimes I've had clients who find it easier to do therapy on the phone anyway, because the connection is a little bit less intense and it feels safer for them to do the therapy that way. In terms of transitioning clients now that are used to meeting me in person and now we're meeting online, I'm finding that after a session or two, we just settle in. It's not exactly the same, but it's so close to the same that the work is being done. It's not superficializing or trivializing the work in any way. The deep work is still being done. So it's mostly me knowing that as I invite the clients to transition, and if we can still maintain that sense of connection and care and productivity, they're going to be just fine with it. So of course I would rather meet with people, and we're all looking forward to that when we can meet in person
Yes.
again. But this is it's a wholesome bridge. It's a wholesome bridge.
Mm-hmm. One thing Sue Johnson said in our first one of these lunches is, and I like to repeat, is the confidence of the therapist is so important. If you believe this is going to work and you're not very tentative, like, oh, this is the best we can do and during these terrible times, you'll do a lot better.
Well, therapists, I think one of the big things I convey to my clients all the time is that nothing they're experiencing, nothing they're struggling with, nothing they're going to tell me about or reveal to me scares me. I can hold anything that they have to offer. And so offering that kind of confidence in the work, in the process, I think helps invite the clients into, okay, I can do this. And so inviting them to go online is somewhat similar to that. Anything can be worked with in any format.
Mm-hmm. From when you started counseling online, did you learn things along the way? In terms of how to do it, even very practical insights you had about how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, how much by phone versus video, whatever.
I think the most important thing is just what I've learned about how to do therapy in general. And I keep doing that. I keep very, very carefully attuning to my clients. I make sure that what I say is a reflection of what I'm hearing them say, or I ask them, what are they hearing me say to them? One of the things that is important to help clients regulate themselves is what I learned from AEDP, which is to go low and slow. It's to have a lower tone of voice, and it's to slow down how I'm speaking. So I do that online. I do that in regular therapy anyway, because my presence is helping regulate the client's nervous system, which of course is what you'll learn about from Steve Porges and Deb Dana when they do their webinar. And so I think it's mostly trusting the therapeutic process and helping clients trust the therapeutic process so that we continue doing the therapeutic process.
Mhm. So, getting back to resources and tools for a second, because you've developed so many of them and use many of them, are there particular tools you find you're using more often, say with anxious clients, which is a good topic for today, that seem to be more effective? Now, these are generalization, and everyone is different, and your relationship with each is different. Just a couple that you particularly like?
So if I could put that in a context, and then I'll get
Sure.
to that question. So when I do work with my clients about resilience, or when I'm teaching clinicians about resilience, I'll highlight that there's considered to be 3 factors of resilience. One is the severity of the external stressor. And so when people are healthy and everyone is at home and some people are still working and there's some financial security and they get along with the people that they're living with, that's going to be very, very different than if someone in the household is sick, or if there is no health insurance, or if the car just broke down. So I do explore with my clients the severity of the external stresses they're facing, because that's going to change their capacities to be resilient for sure. We look at the strength of the external resources, and I will check with clients. Do they have a community? Do they have activities that are meaningful and important and purposeful and rewarding to them? Do they have health insurance? Do they have a financial security? Do they have an education? I mean, we look at the strength of the resources supporting them. Then we'll get to the therapeutic resources, the strength of their internal resources. Do they already have an internal secure base? Do they already have a sense of self-acceptance and self-awareness and self-confidence? Do they already trust themselves? Or do they not like themselves? Is there low self-esteem? Has there been trauma in the background? Do they deal with anxiety and depression and loneliness and grief and loss and shame and an inner critic? So I'm looking for their inner resources as well, and that's where we focus most of the time in the therapeutic process. So that's part of the assessment. So then when people have anxiety, and this is how I hold anxiety, that we know that when we're faced with threat or danger, even when we're faced with the unknown or the uncertain, something is new, our nervous system will rev up, pay attention, let's do something here to solve this problem. And so the sympathetic branch of the nervous system activates. That can be positive. We activate to take care of the situation. And when it's positive, it feels good to be able to do that. We're agentic and empowered. But if we don't feel empowered to deal with the situation, it can go into anxiety or fear or panic. And so I'm offering tools, which I can say in a minute, to help clients soothe their anxiety and come back to their baseline equilibrium. But just as important is when we face danger and it seems like there's nothing we can do to solve the problem, we will collapse. We will shut down and numb out. And that's the activation of the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system going into shutdown and withdrawal. And that can be calming, but it can also immobilize us, and then we don't take action. So I want to be able to help clients re-engage and activate back into that baseline equilibrium. So, it's helping clients find their window of tolerance, their range of resilience, whether it's from anxiety or depression. And so there are many, many body-based tools to help clients. And you know what? Clinicians can use these tools too to regulate our anxiety, to calm down our anxiety. So we regulate, we help the clients regulate. One of the first tools, of course, to manage anxiety is the breath, because the breath is what regulates the nervous system. So when clients remember to breathe, and breathe slowly and gently and deeply and longer on the exhales, that helps regulate the nervous system. When I was fascinated to learn that first responders are taught to do box breathing because when their nervous system is going off in a stressful situation, they're not necessarily going to think of all the tools. But if they can remember box breathing, which is simply breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a breath of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, holding out for a breath of 4. It's a simple tool. When you're counting, your higher brain is online. And so you come back to your higher brain where you can actually do some thinking and figuring out what to do. So box breathing is useful. To be able to sigh, just will regulate the nervous system. And the most important thing about that is just giving ourselves permission to sigh, because we know if we pair a tense moment with a sigh, the sigh will actually help the body relax. So that's another thing to do. So breathing is a way of calming down the nervous system. Touch is probably the fastest way we have of calming down the nervous system. And there are restrictions in therapy about touching clients, though Deb Dana has come up with the hand hug, which is simply a handshake and then putting her hand on top of that, which is a very gentle way of touching the clients. But even now when we're doing our sessions virtually, well, number one, I'll teach in a moment my favorite tool for touch that calms down the nervous system. But I have a client that in the office, we used to do high five. So now when we end our sessions, we still do the high five on the computer. So there's still ways to have that sense of connection. The tool that I teach most often is hand on the heart. There's a lot of science behind that about why it works. But teaching clients to put their hand on their heart, the warm, safe touch of their hand on their heart automatically begins to calm down the nervous system. And then to breathe slowly and gently into the heart center, to breathe in a sense of ease or calm or safety or goodness into the heart center. And then, crucial part, is to remember a moment of feeling safe and loved and cherished with another human being. And this works because it works in our imagination. What we can imagine is real to the brain. So you remember a moment of feeling safe and loved and cherished. And it could be not the whole relationship, just this one moment, with a partner or a child or a therapist or a friend or a spiritual figure or a pet, because pets are great for this. And you evoke this memory of feeling safe and loved and cherished. And then you let that feeling kind of wash through your body. What you're doing is activating the release of oxytocin. And oxytocin is the brain's hormone of safety and trust, of calm and connect. It's the direct and immediate antidote to the stress hormone cortisol. So when people do this exercise, it's powerful enough to calm down a panic attack in less than a minute. So you do this exercise and bring your body back to calm. The way to re-engage the nervous system from depression, from too much shutdown and inactivity, is to move. It's to move the body, because that will re-engage. And even something simple, like I teach this all the time, if you tense a muscle group and hold it and then relax it, you help the body relax. If you do that with progressive muscle relaxation, you count for 7 and then you relax for 15. Again, the counting keeps the higher brain online and keeps you out of worry and rumination. But those simple movements, they have found that when people, the neuroscientists can see in their scanners, when people smile, if people smile for 20 seconds, they can see the shift in the functioning of the brain. Just smiling for 20 seconds. So we use movement and changes in our posture to change our physiology, to change how our nervous system is responding. And of course, one of the biggest ones is power posing, which probably most people are familiar with. But when a client is kind of slumped over, and we notice that. I mean, even if we're working virtually, we can notice that. And they're kind of, and you just simply have the client, I do this in session with the clients, but you have the client straighten their spine and lift their arms up over their head. That shifts the energy in the body. And when clients do that again and again and again and can come into that sense of energy, then they're back in their physiological equilibrium. So there are a lot of body-based tools that we use to manage the reactions of the nervous system to stress and danger. And clients, again, little and often. So I'll have the client practice that with me in a session or in Zoom, and then do it 5 times a day for 30 days and get that installed in your neural circuitry so you remember how to do it.
Linda, listening to you, my breathing relaxed. I'm sitting more up straight. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I think we have one video question, but
Okay.
maybe you can lead us in a breath exercise before we finish. Are you open to just
Okay.
leading us?
Actually,
Yes.
I can lead you in this exercise now
Well, I was
or
going
after
to have
the
a
next
question first.
Okay.
And then at the end, to help us all
Yeah.
relax and go back to the
Okay.
rest of our lives. So
Okay.
do
Yeah.
we have a question on camera? I believe we do. And if not,
No.
oh, yes, I think
Hello?
it's,
Hello.
hi, what's your name and welcome to
Thank
this.
you. My name is Jennifer, and I am in West Virginia, and very rural, very small, very different from the locations that many people occupy. In our community, we were much affected many years ago beyond memory by the 1918 flu, and we had a flood here in 1985, and these experiences here live on in the communal memory, even when people don't have any actual memory of them. And what the community does with these kinds of things really matters. It becomes the narrative as we would use in individual therapy. What's the narrative? I'm strong, I can make it, or outsiders should be shot, or what, and we are hearing public narrative about what is happening now, and some of it kind of xenophobic and some of it strong and powerful. And so I just hope you could comment on that, because in my view, as we go through, as therapists, we're very oriented to the individual, perhaps to families, but a smaller focus, you might say. But I think all of us in the same process are relating to the bigger. And how we're responding relates to the bigger. And in the long run, what we make of all this will relate to the bigger. So if you could comment.
Jennifer, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I do want to say that many lifetimes ago, I was in Vista in West Virginia.
Yay! All right.
And so I have very fond memories of how warm the people were. I played guitar at the time, so I could join any group of musicians and play. So thank you for that. What you're talking about in terms of the larger community narrative, I think is so very, very important. I don't mean to just offer some research and a concept, but it could be comforting. They're finding when people go through, a community goes through any kind of natural disaster, there is a slump in functioning and people can be overwhelmed and disoriented. But as the community pulls together and they survive as a community and rebuild as a community, then their functioning afterwards is at a higher level than it was before the disaster. So we know that. So in terms of these larger narratives, I've been thinking about the stories I've heard from my parents who grew up in the Depression, my parents who went through World War II, and I know people found their way to be resilient. One of the chapter titles in my book, Bouncing Back, is from the British government in World War II, keep calm and carry on. And that was the motto of the government to help people cope with being bombed by the Luftwaffe every day. So we do know that human beings go through catastrophes in every era, in every country, in every part of the world. There are catastrophes going on in the world right now other than the coronavirus. There are other things that are impacting people as well. So we know that people can be resilient. We try to learn how people are resilient. We try to share those stories of how people are resilient. And then we put together the narrative. And actually, one of the tools in trauma work anyway is the coherent narrative that individuals do, but I think communities can do as well. Number one, this is what happened. These are the consequences of what happened. This is what I did at the time, best I could do. This is what I have learned since and how I would do it differently if I could do it over or if I get a chance to do it again. This is the gifts, the lessons, what I found, the silver lining that I found in this happening. And this is what I appreciate about life now because of what happened, not just in spite of, but because of. And so when an individual or a community can put together a narrative like that, this happened, this is what we did, this is how we survived, this is how we helped each other, this is how we learned, this is what we learned, and now to do it differently for the next time. They get a sense of, we did it, we made it, we are resilient. That's not to say there weren't losses. That's not to say there aren't tragedies in what happens. But as a community, as a human species, we can see that we can get through these things and survive. So I think that, not to survive, actually, to thrive and find new meaning, new purpose, new sense of faith in other people. So I think that creating the coherent narrative as a community is absolutely vital. And that's what people do when they meet in support groups or town hall meetings and they share their stories, not just of what is happening, but how they're coping with what is happening. That's creating the community narrative. And I think it's an essential part of the fabric, the safety net that we have to get through it. So I hope that somewhat addressed your concerns.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to think about how we can apply that, because obviously we can't collect and tell stories right now. So, how we might do what you're saying and begin our narrative in a positive way now. And I'll think on that. Thank you very much.
And blessings on that work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So this is what I think we'll do, Linda. We're kind of making this up like with everything else. I'll say a little closing goodbye, not a total goodbye, but bring people up to date with a couple of things about this. Unless you wanted to say something else, Linda.
I just wanted to lead you in the exercise that I thought of.
Yeah. So, and then you'll lead the exercise.
Okay.
And then and Emily on the boards, give Linda the full screen for the exercise in a couple of minutes, and I'll just won't be there. And then when you're done with the exercise, I'll just say goodbye and officially close. But before we go to the exercise, a few things I want to tell people. First, if you missed it or if you'd like to watch any of this again, it is archived on our website, leadingedgeseminars.org. Watch it again as much as you like over the next few months. We have a poll, which we'd really appreciate you taking about a minute and a half at the most. It's on the upper right-hand part of your screen. It says poll. It just gives us feedback of how you enjoy this, as well as some of the technical issues. How did it sound and look? So if you could do that, that would be much appreciated. I'd like you to invite your friends to either view this, so your colleagues, and let people know about our virtual lunches. They're all being archived, so starting last week with Janina Fisher. And, we're just a little Canadian company, and it was so nice to have someone from West Virginia. So please help spread the word to your friends that these lunches are all available, past and future and present. So please do that, and we'd much appreciate that. Linda, if you could provide us with some ways to breathe, and then you'll see me again on the screen.
So, Michael, you asked for a breathing exercise, and one of the first ones I thought of is actually called Compassion with Equanimity. And it's an exercise that was developed by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer in their Mindful Self-Compassion protocol for caregivers, for medical caregivers, for psychotherapists, for family caregivers, to be able to have equanimity when they're caring for another human being. And I use this all the time, working with my own clients. It is a breathing-based exercise. And rather than taking 10 or 15 minutes to actually do the whole thing, I'll just very, very quickly describe it. But the idea is I practice this on my own, and that's how I teach it, but I use it with my clients in real time. So for practice, it's simply to be able to come into a sense of presence, knowing that you're in your body in this moment, coming into a sense of ease and calm and safety into the body. If there's any tension anywhere in the body, breathing into that and relaxing a little bit. Beginning to breathe and focusing your awareness on your breathing. Just a gentle, simple rhythm of breathing in, breathing out. It doesn't have to be anything different. And notice that if there's any stress or worry for yourself in a moment, breathing in a sense of compassion for yourself. You're a human being. Life can be really hard. You're doing the best you can. Compassion for whatever it is that you're facing. And you begin to get a rhythm of the breathing, of breathing in a sense of compassion and kindness for yourself, a sense of nourishing or soothing for yourself, just breathing in the nourishing and the soothing, and then exhaling. And when that seems fairly steady, then you bring to mind, or if you're sitting with a client in the room, you're aware of this person and the suffering and struggles that they're going through, having the empathy and the attunement to them, and beginning to breathe out to them compassion for their suffering and their struggle, compassion for you, nourishing and soothing for you. And there begins to be a rhythm. Breathing in compassion for me, breathing out compassion for you. Breathing in, soothing for me, breathing out, soothing for you. And just saying that in the back of your mind. Nourishing for me, nourishing for you. Soothing for me, soothing for you. And eventually that can become one for me, one for you. One for me, one for you. So it's using the breath in the moment, sitting with a client, whatever their particular struggles are, being able to stay in our own center and our own equanimity as we're holding what the client is going through. There's more to that exercise, but that's the beginning of it, and it's powerfully effective.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you all. Have a good day, and join us for lunch again real soon. Thank you, and have a good day.